after the webinar. So just so you know. And welcome everyone then to this webinar. I'm Amelia Sternberg. I work at the Swedish National Cycling Advocacy Association, which is one of the partners in the HEAT project that's organizing the webinar. The HEAT project, which is about participatory urban planning for healthier urban communities, is a project with partners in Finland, Sweden, Estonia, and Latvia, and is co-founded by the EU Interregional Central Baltic program. And as I hope everybody knows, the theme of this webinar is winter cycling, and we'll be diving into health aspects of year-round active mobility, maintenance, and mobility management for being able to cycle year-round. And in our program today, we have first up, we'll have Peter Schantz of the Swedish School of Sports and Health Sciences, talking about public health and year-round active commuting. And after that, we'll have two different perspectives on sweep salting. We're going to have Juha Jokila of the city of Turku presenting about Turku's sweep salting pilot that they've been doing for the past 2 years now. And we'll also have Anna Niska that's going to be presenting about the Karlstad municipality and the Swedish National Road and Transport Research Institute, or VTI for short, their new sweep salting manual that they've been working on developing. And finally, we'll have Anna-Karin Lindqvist of the Luleå University of Technology telling us about their project with getting kids on bikes to school, even in the wintertime, and how they've taken that from a pilot project and now they're scaling it up into several different schools and municipalities. And at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for questions and discussion with everybody. And just a practical point before we start, each of these 4 speakers are going to have about 10 minutes to talk, and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions after that. And to make it not so messy and easier to follow, we're asking everybody to write their questions out into the chat or the message option in Skype, and then we'll read the questions out loud for the speaker and they'll be able to answer. And it's maybe not the most participatory method of having a discussion, but just for ease of organization in this webinar format, we're going to do it that way. And also after the webinar, you will be getting an evaluation form on mail, and we'd love some feedback from you on the webinar, because we're going to have a couple more this year, and we want to make them as interesting and informative as possible for you. Great, I hope that all sounds good. So we're going to have our first speaker starting now. We have Peter Schantz, who is Professor of Human Biology at the Swedish School of Sport and Health Sciences, who's been researching for over 40 years within these fields. And Peter's research interests include physiology, behavior, and environment, and specifically research projects dealing with active commuting through cycling or walking. I'm going to get your slide queued up here, Peter. Thank you for joining us today, Peter. The mic is yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and hello everyone. My name is Peter Schantz, as Emilia stated, and I'm coming from the world's oldest school on human movement sciences. Started up in 1813, and I'm heading a small research unit dealing with movement, health, and environment. And our overarching question is, how shall we be able to make use of physical activity to support public health and at the same time support a sustainable development? From that point of view, walking and cycling are interesting targets in terms of physical activities, and we have done quite a lot on that issue. Now, physical activity, you might know, can change the risk for a number of diseases. This is just some of them, and we also know that we can delay mortality, prevent what we call premature mortality. Now, the question which is of interest in this situation is to what extent seasonal variations in physical activity affects these possible outcomes. And one can state in general that the effects of physical activity do not last forever. Actually, some of them are rather brief, and I will give you some examples to start with. This is from a study where people drank plus glucose, and we can see here that the glucose is coming from the stomach to the blood, and we see rather quick increases in plasma glucose. The body tries to get rid of it because of its disturbing and problematic to have high levels of blood glucose. So it starts to produce insulin to get the glucose out of the blood system. And here we can see how it decreases down to low values with time. Now, you can see two lines in this image, and they represent the same people, but with different training conditions. First, the dashed line, it's a group that have been without training for just 10 days. And the other line is connected to people that train regularly, the same people that train regularly. And they are runners, they do exercise in the form of running, so not cycling, but that doesn't matter really. Now, if we look at the insulin levels in the blood, we can see that, as we would expect, that when you have glucose in the blood, the insulin production increases and you get it out in the blood system, and it takes it away to the liver and to the muscles, for example. And here we see the curve for the insulin production without any physical training for 10 days, and here you can see with regular physical training. Big difference. You don't need that much insulin if you train regularly. And this is an example of big changes due to only 10 days without training. That's example number one, and it comes from a study in the Journal of Applied Physiology. Another example, which I myself was involved in, was to look at the maximum capacity for energy production in the muscle. And we trained cycling, and we did it 3 times a week, and it was for a period of 6 weeks. Now you can see quite an enormous increase in this capacity to produce energy in the muscles. But with 3 weeks, only 3 weeks of non-training after that, we can see a steep decrease. And it continues until it gets down to the 0 level. So these are 2 examples coming from physiology of quick and rather dramatic changes with training, but also the same kind of changes, but in the other direction with non-training. And this is studied by Vibo et al. In 1992. Now, again, this is just some examples of that the effects of physical activity don't last forever. Now I will look into some results from Stockholm related to the behavior of commuter cycling in Stockholm over the year. And here I will show median values from 2 groups of cyclists. And we can see here that the median behavior of the cyclists in Stockholm is that for both these groups, the cyclists are standing in not used during January, February, and then in March they start to make use of them. And then there's a peak season in April to June, and then there's a vacation, and then it's coming up again after the summer. But you can see that depending on, but slightly more than 4 or 5, some around 4 or 5 months, these people do not cycle, and the effects of that will be then that they lose the health effects that otherwise will be produced. Now this is men, and we can see the same type of curves for women. So it is of interest, as you try in this campaign or this webinar series, to stimulate to cycling all year round, and we can see that there is a, so to speak, great potential to have these increases. And I think that knowing something more about the health effects will perhaps stimulate to another type of behavior. This is a study by myself and Erik Stigell some years ago. To conclude, it is very beneficial for the health if one is having the possibility to cycle all year round. And with that said, I want to thank you for your attention, and here are the contact addresses and the website where we have a number of our studies being presented. So thank you for listening. Thanks.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Peter. And now we have a couple minutes here for questions to Peter. Please write them out in the chat, as we mentioned earlier. I suppose while people are writing, I can ask you, Peter, what would you say to somebody who hears this and knows it, but still thinks it's hard to get out there on their bike in the winter time?
Well, I must say that in the last years, for example, the salt sweeping is changing the conditions, and that's a very good example of changed support for cycling. But also I think that the lights that you can make use of today are so much better, and I think that is important, that you have good light so you can see really the road that you're cycling. So there are a number of such things that you should try out, and I think that always in behavior changes, it's a good idea to try it.
Try it and you might like it.
Try it and you might like it.
You never know. Let's see if we have any other questions coming in here. All right. If you think of any questions for Peter, we can also take them at the end then, because we're doing an open question session. Perfect. Then we now know why it's a good idea to be talking about cycling year round and why we should be getting out there on our bikes. And now we're going to hear from Juha Jukkila, who works as a development manager for the city of Turku. Juha has been working traffic planning for 17 years and has been working as a measure leader for the winter cycling pilot since 2016. Juha is also a year-round cyclist in Turku, and he's going to be presenting Turku municipalities' experiences with the sweep salting pilot for us today. Great, welcome, Juha.
Thank you. Okay, so as Emilia mentioned, we've been doing, this is our third year now that we are doing sweep salting in Turku, and I'm telling about our experiences on that. So how did we choose this measure, and why did we do it? We have quite ambitious goals on increasing the modal split of sustainable modes. Our goal is that in 2030, 66% should be of the splits, the trips from the citizens of Turku should be made as a pedestrian, by cycling, or by public transportation, as now it is 49%. So we hoped it would have increased earlier on already, but hopefully we'll pick it up in this decade. Then there is also a goal for the city of Turku to reach carbon neutrality by 2029, which is the year Turku turns 800 years. And it's been going quite well on the energy sector, but within this decade we should really reduce the emissions from the traffic also. The Turku has a bit over 190,000 residents, and the region is a bit over 300,000 people. The city structure of Turku is so that people live quite near to the city center. So we calculated that over 90% of the citizens of Turku live within half an hour cycling distance from the central square. There's also a large student population, which helps on cycling amounts and the need for improving cycling conditions. And of course, there's also the growing fleet of e-bikes, which helps on the longer trips, also to be done by cycling. According to our cycling barometer in 2016, approximately 23% of the inhabitants of Turku cycle year-round. As in Copenhagen, it's 3 out of 4 that cycle around the year. So there is quite big potential for increase especially on the winter cycling. Icy conditions are quite usual in Turku in winter time, although this winter it has not really gone like that. There hasn't been hardly any snow or ice this winter yet, but usually it is so that we don't have that much of snow. We don't have 1 meter of snow, but it melts quite quickly and then it freezes, so ice is quite usual in the winter time. Also from the cycling barometer, we asked about how should the winter cycling be improved, and a lot of these, which were the biggest hopes, could be done by improved winter maintenance and sweep salting. And also from the cycling barometer, we had quite good support for the development of cycling, as 96% of the inhabitants supported the development of cycling. So how the measure was implemented, it was, I think, in 2015 that we got the idea to try better winter maintenance on cycling. And then we applied for funding for Civitas Eccentric, and that was decided in 2016. And late 2016, we started to gather the data. So we had some visits to the cities that have done the sweep salting already, literature studies, and also studies on our current situation. And we formed a work group from different sectors, and we discussed on the different methods, on different opinions on the de-icing treatments and on the route. And by summer 2017, we made a decision that we should go for the sweep salting and had the tender requests. And late 2017, the sweep salting started the implementation. So this is the third winter now that we are doing this. The benchmarking from the cities and people who have been working on the sweep salting were really rewarding. The city of Helsinki and city of Stockholm both encouraged us to go for the method, and then we also visited VTI in Linköping to discuss their experiences on the sweep salting. So this is the machine that does it. So we made a group decision on the method based on the comparison of the alternatives, and the idea is that in front of the machine there's the brush that cleans the surface from snow, and after the vehicle the salt is spreaded, so that keeps the surface from creating any ice. And on the right you can see a picture how it looks on a normal winter when we have snow or ice. So this is the route where the sweep salting has been done. We had some alternatives on the pilot area. We decided on the red area, which is in the core of city of Turku, in the very center. There were a few things that were mostly emphasized on the decision. We wanted to go for the area that had most cyclists and or pedestrians. The riverside is very popular cycling route in Turku, and then we wanted to do like a loop for the route, so it's easy to maintain it. And then we had some requirements on the infrastructure side also, and we did some minor improvements on the infrastructure. There were, for example, in the riverside, there were puddles forming, and we could have not really maintained it well unless it would have been improved. But nothing very big improvements were made before to the infrastructure before the pilot. So this is the difference how it looked before and after. So it was quite usual before the pilot that the surface is quite icy and there's puddles and it's difficult to cycle it without skids, and also to walk on the surface was usually quite slippery. And after, it's not summer, but it's very much easier and better to walk and cycle on the route. We have a couple of feedback systems. We had a open feedback system, and then we also had some closed feedback from the local cycling association, and a lot of feedback was really positive. So on the first winter especially, it was seen as a big improvement from the normal winter maintenance. Positive feedback were given, for example, on the surface not being slippery and it's clean, safer. There were a lot of hopes for expansion of the winter maintenance routes, and we got also good feedback from the pedestrians and runners also, which especially on the bad weather came from the pedestrian side to the cycling side, and that also caused some negative feedback. So the width of the maintenance was not seen as wide enough. And we did some adjustments to that, in my understanding, for the second winter, and it worked better. There were also some negative feedback on snow piles on some places, and also side effects of salts, such as corrosion, rusting of the bicycles. But from the local cycling association, Turbo, who were trained on how the maintenance, what is the level that we are trying to achieve. From I think there were like 20 or 30 people that were giving feedback from the cycling association, and as a whole, each volunteer experienced the benefits of sweep salting to be much greater than the disadvantages. Then still a few things about lessons learned. Cooperation is very important during the planning of the project, and especially when we had the work group, we had some fears about, for example, using salt in the riverside and near the trees, but with discussions we came to a unanimous decision on how to go forward. Then the first year was really a learning process. We had, fortunately, a very good graduate who had some time to react on the responses and also to monitor the maintenance and how it was done, and kind of spread information. So cooperation with the contractor was very important. And then there was the contractor said that it's very important that you are kind of ahead of your time. So if you for example, leave a lot of snow on the route and there becomes a thick ice, it's very difficult or even impossible to get it away later on. So it's kind of encouraging to the contractor to be very active on the maintaining. In our experiences, I think this is the cost for the first winter, 6,200 euros per kilometer per winter. In our experience, it's 2 or 3 times more expensive than our normal winter maintenance on cycling routes. As I said, we got a lot of positive feedback. Then we also tried for the second winter to change the use of salt. On a different route, we tried to change the salt to use wet sand. So the idea was that when it freezes the wet sand, it gives some structure and it's not slippery. And we had also good experiences from that. So that's something we will look further on when we are deciding on the possible expansion of the winter maintaining. We don't have too much data on the impacts on the cyclist amounts, but on one bridge we had measurements before, or continuous measurements before, 2 years before the pilot and 2 years after that. And in January and February, the cyclist amounts increased 39% on that one bridge, which is quite good, or very good, but we don't know how it changed cyclist amounts on other routes, for example. So we have still the contract for the next year for sweep salting in the route, and after that we should decide how to continue. And we had, as I mentioned, we had also good experience from the sweep sanding, and this is one possibility. And there is also already a decision that we should try to continue the improved winter maintenance, and if we have enough money or to kind of calculate how much it would cost if we would expand the winter maintaining of the cycling. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Juha. We have a couple questions here already for you. Anna from VTI is asking if you got any negative feedback from dog owners about irritated paws on dogs.
I don't think we got, at least if we did, it was very minor. We got some bad feedback from the store owners that people bring salt with their shoes and ruin carpets, for example. But in my understanding, the dog owners haven't been that big. I think the biggest side effect has been the corrosion of the bicycles.
Okay, and Matti Hirvonen is also wondering how many kilometers sweep salting routes were there altogether?
The sweep salting route is 12 kilometers, and I think the sanding route is almost as much, so roughly 20 kilometers altogether, but sweep salting is 12 kilometers.
All right, and then Maria Tomola from Wallonia also is wondering, what about this year, with the conditions in Turku having been, well, interesting. Hardly no snow, lots of rain, but then minus degrees and ice. So I think, what is the plan for the sweep salting and the maintenance of the cycle roads for this season?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there hasn't been really snow and hardly any ice either, so there hasn't been that big need this winter, but we'll see if it changes.
Okay, and then we have a question from Ilmar Parts here also about what kind of method did you use before on these sections then?
Just plowing the snow and using gravel or sand or gravel to not being slippery. So the surface was not as clean as with sweep salting. And we still use that method for the most of the city.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Juha, for your presentation about Turku's experiences with the sweep salting pilot. We're going to keep going with the sweep salting theme here, and we're going to have Anna Niska, who is the research director of Cykelcentrum, which is the Swedish National Road and Transport Research Institute, or more easily said, VTI, their cycling research center. And she did her doctorate dissertation on sweep salting and has been researching sweep salting and cycling related issues for over 20 years. We look forward to hearing about your recent work that you've been doing in collaboration with Karlstad municipality to develop a maintenance manual for municipalities that are interested in thinking about starting sweep salting and how they can do that more easily. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Emilia. Can you hear me well, and can you see my picture now? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we can. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, yeah, like Emilia mentioned, the first studies that we did on sweep salting was actually about 20 years ago within my PhD project. So, of course, this is one of the subjects that I love to talk about. So thank you for inviting me. As we heard from Finland, we also in Sweden have a goal to increase cycling, and we should do that even in winter time. And when you see these pictures, you can sometimes question whether that is wise or not. But as we heard from Peter, it's very important for the health aspect. And also we can see that in cities where we have universities, we have a lot of winter cycling. And also there are a group of people that don't see that they have any other opportunities. That's like the bicycle is the best way to transport themselves. So, and this group of people also, of course, need a well-maintained winter road. The backside of this is, of course, when we look at the accidents, we can see that from accident analysis that of all the seriously injured cyclists we have in Sweden, 8 out of 10 have been injured in a single bicycle accident. And when we go into looking into what the causes have been, we can see that almost half of them have been a cause that is related to maintenance operation in one way or another. And when we further analyze this, we can see that skidding on snow and ice and skidding on gravel is one of the main reasons. And both these reasons are related to winter maintenance. And well, skidding on ice and snow is, of course, the largest proportion we have. But as you can see, also skidding on round gravel is one of the most important reasons. And this is due to that we have the traditional winter maintenance of bike paths. We're using plowing and gritting, which will result in this type of road condition during springtime and also on winters like this one that we had really mild weather. This is, I would say, the most common road condition that we have, and it can last from October until May. And as you can see, it creates problems in for example, in slopes and in crossings where cyclists are turning, and we can see that we have accidents when they're skidding on this round gravel. So that's why, the background why we started to look at other methods, and we started to look at this method with sweep salting. The idea came from Odense in Denmark, where they had tried this method, and also it's been a method that's used also on airports. But now we've done some studies first in Linköping in my PhD project 20 years ago, and then about 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, we started to work with Stockholm municipality and also with Karlstad municipality. And this is the condition that we want to have a clear road surface, and the best condition that you get is also if you have a dry surface. And you can see the comparison with the non-salted bike paths. So to summarize, we have 2 facts: that we want to increase cycling during wintertime, but ice, snow and gravel leads to accidents. So, but the goals that we have is that we want to have an attractive road surface condition, and we also want to have a satisfying friction. But the restriction we have is that we want to use a minimum of salt exposure. So this is what we have been focusing on in our research, is to understand the processes when using salt on bike paths. And what we should know, first of all, I want to emphasize that bicycle paths are not car roads. And that's one of the difficulties in this, is because most research when using salt has been focusing on salting on roadways. So we have a lot of knowledge on how that works, but there is a big difference. If you see on the picture down to the left, you can see the difference here. That the thing is that on a roadway you have the car traffic, which is also helping you to clear the road surface, and you don't have that on a bike path. So that's a lot of the research that we have been doing, is focusing in on understanding the processes of water and ice and the traffic and what's happening on the road surface. And the main question we want to answer is, what is the optimal salt dose in each occasion? And also, what type of salt should we use? Should we use brine, pre-wetted, or dry salt? And also there's the question of what type of salt. As Turke mentioned, they're using the Karlstadlaken, which is a mixture of sodium chloride and calcium chloride. Normally we're using just sodium chloride for salting roads. But now these days there's come some other types of chemicals and other that we are looking into also. And then there's a big question on when, where and how to do the sweep salting. You can have different strategies depending on the preconditions and the weather conditions. The most effective is when you're able to do preventive actions, that you're looking into the weather forecasts and you know that you're going to have a situation where the temperature is falling or when you're going to have precipitation. And then you can do a preventive action. But there are also some other weather conditions that you have to consider, for example, condensation from frost and so on. Then there's also, of course, questions about which equipment you should use, in particular which type of spreader, and that will also affect the results. There's also just how, in the practical manner, how you're performing. Which, for example, which angle or pressure or speed should you have on the broom when sweeping? So in the manual that we are doing in cooperation with Karlstad, we are trying to summarize all these kinds of factors in a sweep salting maintenance manual with both operating guidelines, and also we are having a salt template. And this is the main idea, is that for those municipalities or contractors that are performing sweep salting for the first time, they should have some tips on how to perform it and to avoid the biggest mistakes that you can do when you're starting to use this method. We're also presenting some of instruments and methods you can do to have a better support when you're taking the decisions on what actions to do. And also these types of methods is a good way to follow up the actions that you're doing, so you know what's been successful or not. It's usually some of the equipment that we're using in our research, but it's also some kind of simpler methods that can be used by the operators so that they can have this type of equipment within their vehicles and doing some short and quick surveys of their own if they have a question of For example, what is the road temperature right now? Which can be very different on the temperature that you have in the air. And of course, it's the road temperature that decides whether the salt amount is enough or not. We have also developed some simple samplers to measure the amount of salt that you have on the road surface, because that also decides on the salt dose that you should use in a new action. What is the salt amount that you already have on the road, so that you don't put too much or that you don't put too low salt dose. So this is some things that are included in the maintenance manual. And like I mentioned, we also have are developing a salt template that is giving directions on what should be the salt dose that you should use under different types of conditions. For example, if you're doing an anti-icing before fall in temperature, if you're doing anti-icing before snowfall, or if you're doing de-icing when you've had already ice that has been built on the road surface. But this is only a draft, so not to share these amounts, but we will have the final version finished sometime this spring. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Great, thank you so much, Anna. Are there any questions for Anna about think we can do either on the sweep salting manual specifically, or I'm sure broader sweep salting questions as well? Because I can ask while we're waiting if we have an international audience here that might be interested in the manual, Anna. Is it going to be available in Swedish or in any other languages as well?
For now on, it's only going to be in Swedish, but that of course depends on the interest of it, and also if we have funding to do it, because right now we don't have funding to do anything else but a Swedish version. But our goal is of course to do it in English also, if there is a wish for that.
Great. So when it comes out, if there's a need to have it translated, send an email to Anna and show that there's support for it.
Yes.
Great. Well, if we don't have any more specific questions right now, then maybe we'll take some broader questions at the end, Anna. Thank you so much for your presentation and sharing your work with developing the manual with Karlstad municipality. Perfect. And now, next, we're going to have Anna-Karin Lindqvist, who has joined us. She is a senior lecturer at Luleå University of Technology in Sweden, in the Department of Health Sciences. She received her doctorate in physical therapy in 2015 with the thesis Promoting Adolescents' Physical Activity at School, and has continued researching within the area of children's physical activity, and more specifically on interventions using empowerment and gamification to promote health among youth and their cognitive ability. Welcome to Anna-Karin.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm sorry that I was late coming in here. We have examinations all week here in Luleå. Let's see if I can share this. Bläddra. I'm not that used with Skype, but I think we'll manage in some way. Let's see. Yes, can you see this? Is it all right?
Not yet.
Okay.
For us, it is okay at the moment already.
Okay. Well, I can see it myself. So I get started, and then hopefully it will come up for everyone. Thank you, Emilia, for that presentation. I've been doing research with my research team the last few years about active school transportation. And we have done some work with both children and teachers and parents. And I will try to explain the broad picture first, and then go into specifically about active school transportation in winter conditions. And feel free to ask if there's something I can clarify along the way. So first of all, why bother? Well, since I'm a physiotherapist and from health science, my starting point is the children's health. And sadly, we have evidence that shows that the children growing up today are expected to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. We have continuously throughout all years that mankind has been around become older and older and with better and better health. But this will now turn if something isn't done about it. The recommendation for physical activity in children is 60 minutes per day. And with 60 minutes, we don't mean like running the fastest you can for 60 minutes, but everything counts, like playing in recess, going back and forth to school, going to swimming practice in the evening, going to gym class at school. So 60 minutes of physical activity at any level. Sadly, in Sweden, we have about 13% of the 15-year-old boys that reach this 60 minutes and only 9% of the girls. And WHO came like just a couple of weeks ago with a global report looking at 145 countries, I think. And they said that the children between 11 and 18, 85% globally doesn't reach the recommendations for physical activity. One way of getting your 60 minutes per day is doing active school transportation. And about half of the Swedish children go to school the whole way or part of the way by bike or walking. A little less in the winter and a little more in the fall and spring. We have some cornerstones in our project that is for both winter and summer season. First of all, we have defined active school transportation as walking, cycling, all or part of the distance between home and school. Since we have both cities and more rural areas that you might need to go by bus, but if you can go a part of that distance walking or cycling, then it's still defined as active school transportation. We also very strongly influenced by health promotion. And health promotion, I don't have time to go into detail, but you can, if you define prevention and take that apart from promotion, then prevention is still about trying to hinder something bad. You're trying to prevent something bad. But health promotion is about promoting something that is good. And in our project, we're not working to stop parents from driving their children to school. We are working and trying to get children to walk and bike. And this is really important since you do completely different things if you take the promotion or the prevention angle in your project. Empowerment is also one of our cornerstones, and for us it means that letting the end users be co-creators throughout the whole process. We've been working with children and teachers and parents from the first day, and they still have a strong influence on the whole project and the specifics about the intervention. We are still learning from our end users, and what we have seen is that it's more likely that people will keep on using an intervention or a project that they have been a part of creating. And fourthly, we have gamification. And often when we talk about games in conjunction with physical activity, we see games as a threat. What we have been trying to do is trying to instead think of what can we kind of steal from the gaming world, and gamification means using game elements in something that isn't a game. I mean, going back and forth to school, that's not a game, that's a transport, but you can make it more exciting and more motivating for the children to do it if you can build the intervention as more of a game. This is the setup that we have right now in Norrbotten. We work in grade 2 in fall, on like when there's no snow, and in grade 5 in the winter conditions. And we have Region Norrbotten is they are responsible for all 14 municipalities in Norrbotten, and they send out a small package to every parent with children in grade 2 and grade 5 with some information, and also key chain rings. I don't know the actual word, but both the child and the parent get something to put the keys on with a reminder of going actively to and from school. We also made a movie since we are now at too many schools, too many municipalities. So in the beginning, I personally went to every school and had the information at the parent meeting, but that's impossible, of course, in the end. So we made a movie, and in the next picture I have included the link to the movie if you'd like to see it afterwards. It's really, really nice. It's and the thing is that it's the children that are sending the message to the parents. It's not the researcher. They are standing there and saying to do this and don't do that. We work with 3 themes. It's health, traffic safety, and environment. And then the children go actively 4 to 6 weeks with integrated pedagogical assignments. And every assignment is like picked out from the curriculum. So there's nothing extra. Like for in 2nd grade, you might need to have some math problems. Then you can count people you meet. Or in math in 5th grade, you might do simple hypothesis, and you might do some simple research question or whatever. So there's nothing extra. There's everything that is usually included in the curriculum. Yes, the results really quickly. I will include the actual research articles at the end so you can see them. What we saw that oh sorry, here's something going too fast. Gamification, it was a success factor. And the assignments and the leveling and those factors from the gamification worked really well, and also measuring accomplishment and the reward system that is built into this. But we saw, since I'm a physiotherapist, we were aiming at increased physical activity, but we also got a few other really nice things, more of togetherness, readiness to learn, and also changed parental attitudes. Really quickly, we have the specific winter cycling study we did, and we worked with photo voice, where children took pictures of how is it to go by bike in winter. And they brought these pictures to school, and we did focus group interviews around the pictures, and in the end we got 3 themes. The first theme is involvement and togetherness unlocks motivation. And the citation is, one of the citation is, when I arrive at school and see a lot of friends with bicycles, I feel a fellowship with the others biking to school. It's like some kind of belonging. And this of course talks about something more than just the physical activity. Second theme, strenuous but gives instant rewards and a sense of pride. And the citation is, the picture makes me proud and satisfied that I have accomplished going on this bike every day to school, even though I have 3 kilometers one way. This way I have contributed to the better environment. And this is really consistent through all our studies, that children, they don't care that much about their health. They're not that interested at postponing their heart attack to after 50 or whatever, but they are really concerned about the environment. So they feel that this is worthwhile if they can do something that is positive for the global climate. And the third theme is parents moving from hesitant to positive. And the citation. This is a picture of my bike the first day I got new tires. My parents were quite anxious, but then they tried the bike and got much more positive. After the project, they do not even think about me biking to school. It is nothing more special than doing it in the summertime. And this we have also seen consistently throughout the project, that the parents might be from the beginning kind of hesitant, but the children's enthusiasm kind of guides the parental choice of transport mode. So kind of using the joy and the enthusiasm from children by including gamification have helped parents to overcome their hesitation. These are publications so far, and I will give you a link so you can find them all at the same place. And this is the contact information and also the links links to our web page, and also there's a link that the first one about research, that's both in English and Swedish. The lower one, unfortunately, just in Swedish. It's the municipality of Luleå that has gathered information for the teachers, and there are kind of tips for how to make these assignments. Last but not least, this is my dream picture. This is what I would like to see in my hometown or in Norrbotten. And do any of you have a guess where this picture is taken? You might even recognize it, maybe, since it's from Finland. It's Oulu, and we are so impressed by the way that the schools in Oulu are using active school transportation all year round. So this is my dream picture of the future. Thank you for listening, and please, do you have any questions?
Already from Umeå kommun. How did you get the tires for the kids' bike? Was it sponsored?
Yeah. First, in the first phase, we could get we started out really small in 2 classes, and we could offer winter tires to every kid that wanted one, and it was sponsored actually royal money. We got money from the Kronprinsessparets stiftelse, so they were going on royal wheels the first months, and then we applied for money from Klimatklivet. So now we offer those who feel that they can't afford to buy winter tires, they can apply for it and they get free winter tires.
Okay, so different types of funding there.
Yeah, but you also have seen that it's kind of, I mean, it spreads. Like if you have one child that goes to 5th grade and they get free winter tires and start winter cycling, then most parents, they kind of want their younger kids and maybe older kids also to do it, so they buy winter tires. And I would say the climate in Norrbotten, it's really good to have them.
Yeah, so it becomes very popular, like a trend.
Yep.
Great. And I'm also wondering, because before this was a smaller project, if I'm not mistaken, at one school, I think, and now you're scaling it up to several different schools and several different municipalities. Have there been any particular challenges or lessons learned with the intervention?
Yeah. I think the lesson learned is to start really small and not try to do too much too soon, but start small and learn. And now we are in Luleå at 30 schools, and we have also brought into 4 other municipalities in Norrbotten. So it has grown really fast. And we are now doing a feasibility study to kind of get information about what has worked and what hasn't. It looks really positive, but I'm sure that we will get things that hasn't worked. And I think we are still in the process of refining their intervention, so it will be better and better.
Great. And we also have a question from Marianne Areskog here. And how do we apply this work without all the time and resources? Is it possible to simplify your project?
Yeah, we are really, I know, since we are so really motivated and interested for this to be a school-based project, we know that schools are really burdened. They have too much on their plate already. So we have really worked to make it as simple as possible. So as I said, the assignments that the children do on their way to or from school, they are nothing extra. There's things, I mean, like in 2nd grade, you're supposed to learn something about the environment and sustainability, and then they have an assignment, and on their way to school, stop and pick up some trash and bring the trash to school. And then on the lesson on environment so they sort the trash into paper and plastic or whatever. So they learn while they do it, and we are now applying. We're funded by Vinnova, and we are applying for another project at Vinnova. And hopefully, if we get it, we will try to package this intervention, so it will be really easy for another municipality to take over it. Kind of like do like this: step 1, 2, and 3. So we'll try to keep it really small and really not too burdensome and really cheap also.
Okay, great, thank you. And for those who aren't from Sweden, Vinnova is, I think in English, the Swedish Innovation Authority.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's statewide or nationwide. Yep. And then we have a question here from Katarina Kiviluoto. Have you planned to do follow-up studies to see if the habits have changed, i.e. if the kids are cycling to school?
Yeah, we are now looking at the long-term follow-up from the really first class we started with. So we have, and then we have the one publication from right after they did the project, and now we're looking at data from 1 year and 2 years after they finished the project for the first time. And actually, we did nothing. We didn't help them the second and the third year. It was like, do what you want, and they actually chose to go on with it and do it as a yearly thing. So we're looking at that data and learning much about how to make this sustainable. We're also applying for money from, since, you know, the publications I showed you earlier, it's a lot of kind of more describing the intervention and how we built it. We're now about to do the first RCT. I mean, when you randomize schools and really look at the efficacy of the intervention. So we're not there yet, but we're working on it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anna-Karin. Oh, we have another question here. I'll take a last one here from Ilmar Parts. In winter bikes also need more maintenance. Are you doing something with the kids?
Yeah. Actually, the first project started as a public health project from Luleå kommun, and it was the school department and also the vad heter det då? I mean, I'm lost for words. I mean, the ones that are looking after the roads and the buildings and so. So it was a cooperation between them. So we have looked at both parts. It's more heavy on the education part, but we also have the things like for instance, there were no kids at all going by bike to school before our project. So no one has thought about like where are they supposed to put their bikes. I mean, they had to leave them in a pile of snow, and we had to start to think about you need to clear the snow from the schoolyard so they can park somewhere. So there are absolutely things to solve. I mean, we went to a visit to Utrecht, and there they have like tens of thousands bicycle parks beneath roofs. In Sweden, or in Luleå, we have 4. So I think we have a long way to go working with that also.
Okay, great. Thank you for all that information, Anna-Karin, about your work with children's active school transportation.
Thank you.
I'll backtrack a little bit here. We had a question for Anna here. From Matti Hirvonen about how many cities or municipalities in Sweden are already using sweep salting. Anna, would you like to, I know you already wrote out your answer here, but would you like to just comment that quickly?
Yeah, it's been about between 25 and 30. I don't know, we have a report listing all the municipalities for those who are interested. And I have also added a list of publication at the end of my presentation, which I guess you will share later on, so you can see there. There has been a problem in later years, though, that some of the municipalities are stopping using the sweep salt method due to costs. So maybe the list is not really updated with the current situation.
Yes, that is a trend we've been hearing about these past couple of months, particularly. Great. Now we've had all our speakers presenting. We're going to open it up for a bigger general discussion. And Anna-Karin, I think you have to leave shortly, right? So we'll just have you for a few more minutes. So if there's anything you particularly want Anna-Karin's feedback on, pose it now. I think we can start off with a question for all the presenters on what would be your best tip for a municipality that wants to start working with promoting winter cycling? What should they focus on if you're just starting to think about working with winter cycling? And I think we can start with Peter here, sitting next to me.
Well, I was thinking on the last presentation actually in relation to how to promote it and how to get these habits going on from early age. And I think that it would be very, very important to train the physical education teachers and having them being promoters of cycling to school, for example, not only to school but in general. So perhaps the municipality can create contact with its teachers and support them in their in training them, because this is really something that most physical education teachers are not trained into this. So that's one aspect that I would like to feed into this discussion.
Okay, so working on getting it into the school curriculum and lesson plans. Yeah,
and I think that it's important that one subject or some subjects have the responsibility to work with these. It's too important to, so to speak, not be part of school.
Perfect. So working with kids. Anna-Karin, do you want to comment as well?
Can I comment on that? Since, as I mentioned before, and as we all know, school is it's a kind of, they have a heavy burden since before. You need to really motivate them what's in it for them. And I think at least in Sweden, we have some writing about that they're supposed to work with children's health and so forth. But they are more motivated if you talk about physical activity in conjunction with more of cognitive functions. I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that physically active children are have a better memory and can focus better and so forth. So if you focus on that, the schools are more interested. And also, I think a really good tip is to start small. Start with a few classes, a few schools, and then they, in their role, can be role models. So now we have kind of, like 20 or 30 champions that have been in this project in several years, and they can help their peer teachers. So it's not that dependent then on the external expert. In the end, it has to be like a self-playing piano. It has to go on and on, even when we don't do research on it anymore.
Okay, thank you, Anna-Karin. And do you have any thoughts on tips for municipalities that are starting out? What's your best tip on working with winter cycling?
I think the maintenance is really a big part of it. Of course, you need also marketing, but it helps really if you have something to market. So I think we asked in Stockholm about how they have promoted or marketed the sweep salting, and it stick to my mind that they said that it really sells itself, because you can really see the difference on where the routes are, where you are using, for example, the sweep salting. So and as it becomes more usual, the winter cycling amounts are increasing in my understanding. So I think it's easier for more people to also join and try it. But I think you still need to do something for the maintenance, especially from the city or state point of view.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think when it comes to, the children that we have in our project, they are really for it. They don't see the hindrance, they don't see the barriers. But the parents, that's a different story. And they are really concerned about their children's safety, and they should be, of course. However, we know from statistics that it is really safe. To go by bike in the winter, it is really safe. But they don't feel like it's safe. So it's and you can't convince them by statistics. They need to experience it in some sense. So it's really very much about a change of attitudes and at the parents, I would say.
And Anna, you've worked with a lot of different municipalities with sweep salting and other cycling related projects. Do you have any input?
Yeah, I can say that summarizing all our presentation is that it's showing that the combination of both the behavior actions and doing winter maintenance is important to work with both, because like Anna-Karin mentioned, if they don't have anywhere to put the bikes or if the roads are not cleared, they can't go by bike. And if you're using sweep salting and no one knows about it, there's no good. So you need both, I think. And also these types of actions that make people to start to use the bike and to experience it, the benefits of it. I think that is what we have to focus on now, especially in those municipalities that are already implementing the sweep salting. Also, that I think there should be a discussion about, like I mentioned, that a lot of municipalities, some municipalities are stopping using sweep salting because of the cost. And then we have to have a discussion of what about the cost for in total, because of the accidents that you're saving and the environment and health and so on.
Yeah.
So it's just that's a big difficulty. One thing is the cost for the municipality, and the other thing is the cost for the society, and we have to look into that more to see that it's actually worth spending the money.
Yeah, absolutely true, Anna. And I know that in the end, it's all about money. And what we are trying to do, and we're not there yet either, but we're working on it, is to get some models that you can calculate the how much do you gain if a child goes actively instead of being driven by car, and kind of our really preliminary calculations show that it might be as much as 10 Swedish crowns for each child and each kilometer, and then we have both the costs and the benefits included. So it's a huge amount of money to be gained, but not maybe at the same moment as you spend them. It's like in a life perspective. So the money might be gained like 20 or 30 years after. And as a politician, you need to make decisions every day. And I mean, getting this year's budget together seems to be a very high priority. And it's few politicians and municipalities that have the strength to keep an eye open for the future and have the longer perspective.
Yeah, and you also have to look at the cost and put them in a perspective. I was visiting Copenhagen and talking about their winter maintenance and bypass. They are also using salt. And they was saying, of course, yes, it's a cost. But if you look at the costs for all the inhabitants, it's like one beer for each inhabitant. So it's if you look at it, that's not a lot of money.
That might be the way to persuade politicians. Put it in beer, in a sense of beers instead.
Yeah.
And also mobility management and working with behavior change. So both what individuals and what organizations can work on.
Sorry, Emilia.
I have a comment.
Sorry, Emilia,
Yeah?
Can you say that again? I think we couldn't hear you from the beginning.
Oh, yep. I was just summarizing that it's both maintenance and mobility management and working with behavior change that's going to be needed. And I see that you commented here, Laura, that I think on Anna-Karin's comment that the heat tool that we also work with in this project provides a good way to count the savings on premature deaths and to show those socioeconomic and public health benefits of active mobility. And I think, Anna-Karin, you have to leave soon, so I'll pose another question and I'll give you the first chance to answer it before you have to go. Do you have any thoughts about how climate change might affect winter cycling?
Well, I'm not an expert on the climate and environment, but as I said earlier, this is a strong persuasive factor for the children to wanting to be a part of it. So in some sense, it's kind of promoting. I mean, this grim outlook for the future promotes to do something about it today. And I don't want to seem like I'm complaining, but the winter so far in Norrbotten has been dreadful. It's like almost no snow and just a lot of ice. So I'm hoping this is not a sign of the climate change. But as I said, I'm not an expert. I'm more of a health science person.
Juha, would you like to comment from your perspective?
I'm not an expert on the climate change either, but it seems that we're getting less snow, although there are differences between the winters. So with less snow and more ice, for example, the sweep salting is good in our city at least. So it might be easier to kind of maintain, although a lot of snow would also be quite good to cycle on winter also, but we haven't had that really for some time now.
And Anna, any thoughts about how climate change is going to be affecting our winter cycling conditions?
Well, of course it will be affect the conditions. But that's also when you look at the methods that you're using. I think it's a bad idea to stop using the sweep salting when we look at the winters that we've had the last year here in almost all of Sweden, because then using grit is not really a good method if you don't have a lot of snow. But also in the discussion promoting cycling, then the environmental argument seems to be a good argument in some groups, but not in all groups. So we should not focus too much on that. But there are a lot of other arguments to get people on their bikes in winter, and I think we should promote those more. And also, it's very good that we have now the Agenda 2030 focusing on several other goals than just the climate, although the climate is of course very important.
Thank you for your input. We're just almost running out of time here, so I just want to finish with a last question about what each of your personal best tips for getting out there on your bike in the wintertime is. We'll start off with Peter.
I think I'm returning to what I said actually before, and that's try it out. And why not try it out with new types of equipment that exist today, making it, at least from my point of view, more attractive to cycle, not least the new types of lights that can shed light on the roads and on other people in the roads much better than before. So that's a suggestion.
Thank you. And Juha, I know we heard that you're a year-round cyclist. What's your personal best tip?
I think good clothes are one part of it, and then skid tires are really good, especially on the front tires. So I think you can do a lot with those already, being a cyclist, and I think it's a bit inside your head also, so that there are bad days in the winter time that it's not so nice to cycle, but a lot of days it's quite easy to cycle on the winter. So just the mindset and the equipment helps a lot.
Like the saying, there's no bad clothes or no bad weather, only bad clothes.
Exactly, yeah.
And Anna, what's your number one thing that gets you out there in the winter time?
Like you mentioned, changing the mindset. Instead of focusing on that it's very dark and rainy or snowy and cold, just thinking that if I wasn't on my bike, I wouldn't get out this day. So I think that's the main thing. And also what I found on my personal perspective is that since I got an e-bike, I cycle almost anywhere every day. And there's so that's a good, even long distances. So that's a good tip.
So finding ways to help yourself.
Yes.
Be able to get out there. Great. Well, thank you so much. I don't think we have any questions coming up in the chat, but like I said, we're going to be publishing all the presentations on the HEAT website, the HEAT project website, and they all have the contact information of all the presenters. And we'll also be putting the recording up there if you need to consult it later or want to send it to somebody. And just also a reminder that we're going to be sending out an evaluation later on for the webinar. And we'd love your feedback so we can make these even better in the future. The next webinar is going to be in April on the topic of participatory methods in urban planning, with a specific focus on cycling, of course. And you'll be able to find more info on that on our website, heatproject.eu, later on. So thank you so much for joining us all today. I'm wishing you happy winter cycling these coming weeks.